The auctioneer lifted his gavel and looked over the growing crowd gathered outside a quiet brick home. By authority of the county court, he announced, this foreclosure auction will begin in 60 seconds. A murmur spread through the neighborhood. Some people had come hoping to buy the property. Others were there because they couldn't believe the owner was about to lose everything over what had started as an HOA dispute. Standing alone at the end of the driveway was Callan Mercer. The 43-year-old former Army combat medic wore faded blue jeans, worn brown boots, and a dark navy flannel shirt. His hands were calm, but his eyes never left the American flag hanging from the porch. He had carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire. He had survived explosions that should have killed him. But nothing had prepared him to watch strangers prepare to auction off the home he had built for his family. Across the street, HOA President Vivian Blackwood stood beside her attorney with a satisfied smile. She folded her arms confidently. Some people, she said loud enough for nearby neighbors to hear, think military service puts them above community rules. Several residents looked away, uncomfortable with her comment. Just as the auctioneer opened his mouth to call for the first bid, the sound of tires echoed through the silent street. A black government SUV turned the corner and stopped beside the crowd. Everyone watched as a uniformed officer stepped out. His nameplate read, Major Adrian Whitlock, National Guard Judge Advocate General's Corps. In one hand, he carried a locked government evidence case. In the other, a sealed court envelope. Without raising his voice, he looked directly at the auctioneer. I respectfully request that these proceedings pause pending immediate judicial review. The confident smile slowly disappeared from Vivian Blackwood's face. She hadn't expected anyone to challenge the foreclosure, especially not someone carrying official military records. What Major Whitlock had discovered during the previous 48 hours was about to expose a truth that no one on that street saw coming. If you enjoy stories where courage defeats corruption and justice always wins, subscribe and let's begin. 18 months earlier, life looked very different. Callan Mercer had finally found the quiet he spent years searching for. After multiple deployments as an Army combat medic, he returned home carrying memories that would never completely fade. He rarely spoke about the soldiers he treated on the battlefield or the lives he couldn't save. Instead, he focused on building a peaceful future. His modest brick house sat on a tree-lined street in the small community of Willow Creek, Colorado. It wasn't the biggest home in the neighborhood, but every room reflected years of sacrifice and hard work. Every morning began the same way. At sunrise, Callan walked his golden retriever, Ranger, through the neighborhood. He waved to neighbors, stopped to help anyone who needed a hand, and never hesitated to carry groceries for older residents. Most people knew him simply as the quiet veteran who always showed up when someone needed help. When 12-year-old Tyler Bennett fell from his bicycle one afternoon, Callan instinctively rushed over. His medical training took over. Within minutes, he had cleaned the wound, stabilized the boy's injured arm, and calmly reassured him until paramedics arrived. Tyler's father, Harold Bennett, never forgot that act of kindness. "You're always helping someone," Harold said later. Callan smiled. "I wore the uniform for years. Helping people doesn't stop when you take it off." Those words spread through the neighborhood, earning him even more respect. Unfortunately, not everyone admired him. Just 3 months after being elected HOA president, Vivian Blackwood began changing the atmosphere of Willow Creek. She promised to increase property values and enforce community standards equally. At first, residents applauded her determination. Then the warning letters started arriving. One homeowner received a fine because his trash bin had remained outside for an extra hour. Another family was cited because their mailbox color wasn't an approved shade. Children were told they couldn't leave bicycles on driveways. Holiday decorations had to be removed within hours after each holiday ended. People whispered their frustrations behind closed doors, but few dared challenge Vivian directly. She seemed to enjoy reminding everyone that the HOA rules gave her broad authority. One afternoon, Callan found his first violation notice taped neatly to his front door. He unfolded the paper and frowned. According to the letter, his American flag pole exceeded the community's approved height by 6 inches. Callan looked at the flag, waving gently in the breeze. It had been installed years earlier and had passed every previous inspection. He quietly measured it himself. The measurements matched the original HOA approval records. Certain there had been a mistake, he decided to resolve the issue respectfully. He had no idea that this simple conversation would become the first move in a carefully planned campaign against him. The next morning, Callan walked into the Willow Creek HOA office carrying a folder filled with documents. Inside were the original architectural approval forms, dated photographs of his property, and every receipt for HOA dues he had paid over the years. He wasn't there to argue. He simply wanted to clear up what he believed was an honest mistake. Vivian Blackwood barely looked up from her desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Mercer?" she asked coolly. Callan placed a folder in front of her. "I received a violation notice about my flagpole. These are the original approval records. It appears the measurements on the notice don't match what's on file." Vivian glanced at the paperwork for only a few seconds before sliding it back. "Our latest inspection found a violation," she replied. "You'll need to correct it or pay the fine. I'd appreciate it if someone could come out and measure it with me. Our inspector's report is final." Callan remained calm. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for accuracy." Vivian leaned back in her chair. "The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Mercer. If you disagree, you're welcome to file an appeal." Her tone made it clear the meeting was over. Callan thanked her, picked up his folder, and quietly left. Over the next several weeks, more notices arrived. His mailbox was supposedly the wrong color. His driveway had oil stains that didn't exist. His landscaping was labeled poorly maintained, even though it looked nearly identical to several neighboring yards. Each letter carried another fine. Each fine added late fees if it wasn't paid immediately. Harold Bennett watched the pattern unfold. "This doesn't make sense," he told Callan one evening. "Half the neighborhood has the same mailbox you do." Callan nodded. "If I noticed, then why are you the only one getting fined?" Callan looked toward his house. "I think that's exactly the question." Rather than lose his temper, Callan documented everything. He photographed his property every week. He kept copies of every letter. He saved every email. He even recorded the dates and times of conversations with HOA representatives. Years as a combat medic had taught him one lesson above all others. Stay calm. Gather facts. Let the evidence speak. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived by certified mail. Across the top were the words, "Final notice of delinquent HOA assessments." Callan stared at the total. According to the HOA, he now owed more than $18,000 in unpaid fines, fees, legal costs, and interest. He read every page twice. Several charges referenced violations he had never received. Others listed dates when he had been away on National Guard training. Some documents even contained signatures that didn't look authentic. For the first time, Callan realized this wasn't just about strict rule enforcement. Something was seriously wrong. He folded the notice carefully and reached for his phone. There was only one person he trusted to help uncover the truth: attorney Samantha Pierce. Within 24 hours, she was sitting across from him, reviewing every document spread across his dining room table. After nearly an hour of silence, Samantha slowly removed her glasses. She looked directly at Callan. These records raised some very serious questions. Callan's expression tightened. "What kind of questions?" Samantha tapped one page with her pen. "The kind that could change this entire case." Callan leaned forward as Samantha organized the documents into neat stacks. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Don't leave out a single detail." For the next 2 hours, Callan explained every notice, every payment, every conversation with the HOA, and every appeal he had filed. When he finished, Samantha compared his records with the documents sent by the HOA. Something immediately caught her attention. "Look at these payment dates." Callan studied the pages. "They're wrong." "Not just wrong," Samantha replied. "Several payments cleared your bank before the HOA claims they were overdue." She opened Callan's online banking records. The confirmation numbers matched. The money had been received. Yet the HOA ledger still listed those payments as unpaid. "That isn't a simple bookkeeping mistake," Samantha said quietly. "If these records are accurate, someone altered the account history." A heavy silence filled the room. The following week, Samantha filed a motion asking the court to halt the foreclosure while the records were examined. The HOA's attorneys opposed it immediately. They insisted the foreclosure followed every required procedure and that Callan had ignored repeated warnings. Vivian Blackwood appeared outside the courthouse after the hearing, speaking confidently to a local reporter. "This community has rules," she said. "No homeowner is exempt from them." Callan walked past without responding. He refused to argue in front of cameras. He believed the courtroom, not public opinion, was where the truth belonged. A few days later, Harold Bennett knocked on Callan's door, carrying an old storage box. "I found these while cleaning my garage," he said. Inside were copies of neighborhood newsletters and HOA meeting agendas from several years earlier. One document listed the board members who had approved Callan's original flagpole, landscaping, and exterior improvements. Every item the HOA now claimed was unauthorized had actually been approved years before. Samantha smiled for the first time in days. "This helps," she said. "A lot." But then she noticed something even more important. The approval records kept by Harold didn't match the versions the HOA had filed with the court. Several pages appeared to have been replaced. Someone had altered the official history. Samantha looked up at Callan. "This is no longer just a foreclosure dispute." "What does that mean?" "It means we may be looking at falsified records." At that moment, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar government number. She answered. After listening for nearly a minute, her expression changed completely. When she ended the call, Callan asked, "Who was it?" Samantha took a slow breath. "Major Adrian Whitlock, the National Guard JAG officer." She nodded. "He's been reviewing military documentation connected to your training periods. He says he found something that doesn't just contradict the HOA's timeline." She paused. "It may prove that key legal notices were issued while you were away on verified military duty, and that some records don't add up." Callan frowned. "Can he help?" Samantha closed the file and stood. "If what he believes is true, this case is about to become much bigger than either of us expected." 2 days later, Samantha Pierce and Callan Mercer arrived at Major Adrian Whitlock's office inside the National Guard legal headquarters. The major greeted them with a firm handshake before placing a thick evidence binder on the conference table. "I've reviewed your attorney's request," Whitlock said. "I also compared it with military attendance records, certified training schedules, and official correspondence." He opened the binder. "Mr. Mercer, according to these records, you were attending federally recognized National Guard training on 3 separate occasions when the HOA claims it personally delivered legal notices to your home." Callan exchanged a glance with Samantha. "That's impossible," he said. "I was over 200 miles away." Whitlock nodded. "The military records confirm that." He slid several certified documents across the table. "Every service member signs in and out during training. Those records are time-stamped and independently verified." Samantha carefully examined the paperwork. "If these notices were never properly served," she said, "the foreclosure process could be legally defective." Whitlock didn't jump to conclusions. "It raises serious questions," he replied. "The court will decide what those questions mean." Samantha subpoenaed additional HOA records. This time, the judge ordered the association to produce its inspection logs, financial ledgers, board meeting minutes, and correspondence related to Callan's property. A week later, boxes of documents arrived. As Samantha and her legal team reviewed them, inconsistencies began to pile up. Some inspection reports listed dates when security camera footage showed no inspector had entered the neighborhood. Meeting minutes referenced votes that several board members later testified they had never attended. Most troubling of all, the HOA's payment ledger didn't match its own bank deposits. "Someone wasn't just making mistakes," Samantha said quietly. "Someone was rewriting the record." News of the dispute spread throughout Willow Creek. Neighbors who had stayed silent for months began coming forward. One family admitted they had been pressured not to question HOA decisions. Another resident produced emails showing that approved home improvements had later been labeled unauthorized. Harold Bennett testified in a deposition that Callan had always paid his dues on time. "I've lived next to him for 8 years, Harold said. "If there was ever a problem, he fixed it immediately." None of this made sense. For the first time since the foreclosure began, the momentum started to shift. Vivian Blackwood noticed it too. Her confident public statements became shorter. She stopped speaking to reporters, and during one court hearing, she avoided looking directly at Callan. Still, the foreclosure had not yet been canceled. The auction remained scheduled unless the court found sufficient legal grounds to stop it. As the hearing date approached, Samantha organized every document, every witness statement, and every certified military record into a single case file. She closed the binder and looked at Callan. "We're ready." Callan nodded, though he knew the hardest day was still ahead. In just 48 hours, a judge would decide whether the foreclosure could proceed or whether the evidence revealed a process so flawed that it had to be stopped. The courtroom would determine not only the fate of his home, but whether the truth could finally overcome months of intimidation and deception. The county courthouse was filled long before the hearing began. Residents of Willow Creek packed the public gallery. Reporters filled the back rows with notebooks and cameras ready. The dispute that had started over HOA fines had become one of the most talked-about legal battles in the county. At exactly 9 a.m., the courtroom doors opened. Judge Helena Prescott entered. "Please be seated." The room fell silent. On one side sat Callan Mercer beside his attorney, Samantha Pierce. Across the aisle, Vivian Blackwood sat with the HOA's legal team. She appeared composed, but the confidence she had displayed for months had noticeably faded. Judge Prescott looked over the case file. "We are here to determine whether the foreclosure proceedings against Mr. Mercer were conducted in accordance with the law. Counsel, you may begin." Samantha stood. "Your Honor, this case is not about whether homeowners must follow community rules. They absolutely must. This case is about whether those rules were enforced through a lawful and honest process." She presented bank records showing Callan's HOA payments had been received. Next came photographs proving that several alleged violations either did not exist or had already been approved years earlier. Then Harold Bennett took the witness stand. "I've been Mr. Mercer's neighbor for 8 years, Harold testified. "He's one of the most responsible people I've ever met." The HOA's attorney questioned him aggressively. "So you're saying the HOA fabricated everything?" Harold remained calm. "I'm saying what I personally saw. Mr. Mercer maintained his property, paid his dues, and tried to resolve every issue peacefully." His steady testimony left a strong impression on the courtroom. Finally, Samantha called her last witness. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Major Adrian Whitlock." The courtroom grew even quieter as the National Guard JAG officer walked to the witness stand in full dress uniform. After taking the oath, he placed a sealed evidence binder on the witness stand. "Major Whitlock," Samantha began, "did you review official military records related to Mr. Mercer's National Guard service?" "I did." "Were those records maintained in the ordinary course of military operations?" "Yes." "And what do they show?" Whitlock opened the binder. "They confirm that Mr. Mercer was attending verified National Guard training during multiple dates on which the HOA claims legal notices were personally delivered to him." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Samantha asked one final question. "In your professional opinion, are these military records authentic?" Whitlock answered without hesitation. "Yes, they are certified official records." The judge leaned forward and carefully examined the documents. Across the courtroom, Vivian Blackwood's expression changed. For the first time since the case began, she looked genuinely worried. The HOA's attorney rose for cross-examination. "Major Whitlock," he began, "isn't it possible that Mr. Mercer simply returned home after training and received those notices later?" Whitlock remained composed. "If that had happened, the records should reflect lawful service after his return. Instead, the HOA's filings state the notices were personally delivered on dates when Mr. Mercer was documented to be on military duty." The attorney tried another approach. "But you're not accusing anyone of fraud, are you?" "No," Whitlock replied evenly. "I'm stating what the certified records show. It is up to the court to determine their legal significance." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Helena Prescott spent several minutes reviewing the exhibits, comparing payment records, military documentation, HOA meeting minutes, and inspection reports. Finally, she looked up. "The evidence demonstrates significant inconsistencies in the HOA's records," she said. "The court cannot permit a foreclosure to proceed where the reliability of the underlying notices and accounting has been seriously undermined." She paused before delivering her ruling. "Effective immediately, the foreclosure proceedings against Mr. Callan Mercer are vacated. The scheduled auction is canceled." A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Callan closed his eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath. His home was no longer at risk. But Judge Prescott wasn't finished. "The discrepancies presented today warrant additional review by the appropriate authorities. The court orders the disputed records preserved and refers the matter for further investigation consistent with applicable law." Vivian Blackwood lowered her head. The confidence that had once defined her was gone. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered around Callan. Harold Bennett smiled and shook his hand. "I knew the truth would come out." Callan smiled back. "It took a lot of people willing to stand up for what's right." Major Adrian Whitlock stepped forward. "You earned this outcome," he said. "You stayed calm, documented the facts, and trusted the legal process." Callan looked toward the American flag flying above the courthouse. "In the military," he said quietly, "I learned that integrity isn't tested when life is easy. It's tested when everything you value is on the line." Weeks later, Willow Creek elected a new HOA board committed to transparency and accountability. The atmosphere in the neighborhood slowly changed. Families once afraid to speak at meetings now participated openly. Neighbors greeted one another without fear of retaliation. One warm evening, Callan stood on his front porch watching children ride their bicycles down the street. The same American flag that had inspired the first dispute fluttered peacefully in the breeze. He smiled, not because he had defeated someone, but because the truth had prevailed. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on the battlefield. They're won by ordinary people who refuse to surrender their integrity when justice seems out of reach.